let's call the August 23rd, 2016 Board of Commissioners meeting to order. And our first order of business is please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda review.
Mr. Chair, we do have a couple of minor adjustments to the agenda. First one being in item number 9, we have an additional resolution to go with the operational enhancement grant agreement. And then the second correction is number 10. Mr. John Schneider is actually with Ducks Unlimited rather than the DNR.
Okay.
I'll move the agenda with the revision.
Second.
I got a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner committee reports. We'll start with Commissioner Piepho this morning.
All right. Yeah, it's a little while, I guess, since our last. August 3rd, we had department heads on Wednesday.
Let me see.
And then August 4th.
I think we had a board meeting on the 9th.
Yeah.
Ninth, yep.
What did I say, the 5th? Yeah.
Work session. Was on the ninth. That was a work session, so the
Yeah.
week before that was the board.
Because we had...
You're right.
Yep. So it was the 3rd.
You're
We
right.
had to start out there because we started on the 2nd with the board. Yeah. August 4th, then Kip and I, we had RCF facilitation, and that was at the Vikings training camp, so that was kind of fun. And then August 9th, for me, we had the work session, and August 13th at the, I guess that was Pat and Kip, we were out at the farm, right? Wasn't that the day we were out at the breakfast at the farm?
Breakfast on the farm.
Farm Bureau, that Saturday morning, that had
Mhm.
over, what did they say, 1,200 people there?
Wow.
1,600.
1,600 people, excuse it. Yeah, it was about double what they normally had. And then on the 16th, Kip and I were at a joint ditch meeting with Brown on the phone. And then 21st, they had, that was the airport, that was just this last Sunday. Airport fly-in,
Mhm.
a bunch of us were there. And then this morning, we had new employees. And then that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Commissioner Stuehrenberg.
Well, I have a rather short one myself. Again, the department meeting, head meeting on the 3rd. On the 8th, myself and Will and his bride were at the Blue Earth County Farm Bureau meeting down in Mapleton. Let's see, we had our work session on the 9th. And I then went off and went out to the Black Hills for a week. So, but during that time, I did make a Central Region call-in on the 11th for NACO, and made that. On the 18th, I had a TDS board meeting. Where it was kind of exciting. We are absolutely caught up 100% with our cataloging, which Will understands was a huge issue.
That's awesome.
But we're caught up. I mean, we had a little celebration for that.
I can honestly say the 9 years that I was on the board, we never achieved that.
Yep.
So that's
And that was just since the first of the year, so that was
Because you got on?
I'll say that, but it wouldn't be true.
No, I know.
But when we are starting September 1st, we have our new director is taking over. He'll be at TDS September 1st. So exciting times at TDS. Let's see, and then I was at the EAA breakfast, and there was 1,240 people served at the breakfast, and there was over 100 planes.
Wow.
When they were
So
flying, they were live.
That's amazing.
It was, and the reason I knew that is because I had my airport commission this morning at 7 o'clock. And then our new employees, which it's always exciting to see new employees for Blue Earth County.
Mhm.
And that's mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Vance. Commissioner Campbell.
Hi. our last meeting was August 2nd. And we had a shorter one that day with no luncheon. We missed having that luncheon meeting together. But on the 3rd, department head meeting, and that was a different meeting. Josh Milo was helping to lead the meeting, and Bob's absence, and I guess John's is our acting deputy administrator. Is that correct? Or?
Yes.
Okay. And on the 4th, went to the South Central TZD meeting, towards zero death. That's always held up at MnDOT, their District 7 office up there, and always interesting things that are happening around the state. A lot of educational outreach efforts. Also planning for this next year's contract with TZD. On the 5th, luncheon meeting I had with Mike Brennan. He wanted to talk about some of the possible ideas for looking at options for county space, for if we need increased space needs. Then on the 9th, a county work session, and I wanted to compliment our chair as he stayed on topic and on schedule. We were done by noon.
A lot of stuff there.
There's a lot of stuff. Also, let's see here, on the 9th, I believe that was the day we had elections, and so I don't know if everybody got a chance to do that, but
Yep.
all we had basically was a judge, I think, at least for me anyway. It's on our end. And let's see, we stopped in at the Eagle's Nest also, I guess, after our work session, and we had the Sheriff Brad Peterson stop in, Mike Maurer, and is it Paul Barta? Is that his name?
Yep.
Paul Barta. And he was recently promoted, wasn't he?
Took Rich Murray's spot.
Took Rich Murray's, okay, so that was nice to see those guys. And then, let's see, canvassing board meeting. Trying to think what day that was on. I don't have the date here, but it was 2 days later, I'm assuming, so it probably was on I'm thinking the 11th. And that was Patty O'Connor that was there helping with it, you know, familiar name and face.
No, because I can't be on
And
in November.
our Mayor Anderson from the city was there.
Okay.
You know, I mean, of course, it's not a very deeply involved meeting, but we actually go through and look at the procedure of how they put together all the tallies and the voting, and Michael Stahlberger was there to assist too, and it was a good meeting. So then on the 16th, my wife Dawn and I, we took off for a full week, and we were up, we wanted to make it up north for a big full moon, and that was the 16th through the 22nd. So we were just over the Canadian border on a remote island together, and everything went very well. Got to meet some of the neighbors that sometimes camp up there and have places up there too. So it was a wonderful time, and I'm back now, so thank you.
Do you have cell phone service up there? or
No, I mean, at night I can...
Completely cut off.
If I stand like this with my hand in the air on the tallest part of the island, I can sometimes get text messages. Yeah.
Poor guy, yeah.
Thank you, Drew.
Yeah.
Commissioner Purvis.
Okay, on August 2nd, I attended the Rapidan Night Out. Always have a good time with those folks over there. Gave them a briefing on what's going on in the county. Then on the 3rd, we had the department head meeting. On the 4th, we had the SWCD. One of the things we talked about was funding with those folks, and I think things are looking good for them in the coming year. On the 8th, they had the a buffer workshop put on by AMC over at SCTC in the afternoon. A lot of good information there. A lot of stuff to think about. As Vance said, he and I were at the Farm Bureau meeting in Mapleton that night. So it's good to get together with the folks there and hear their thoughts. Then on the 9th, we had the work session. And on the 22nd, I attended a jail diversion meeting over at Human Services to talk about how that program is progressing, and then of course the new employee meeting this morning.
Thank you, Will. A couple things. I also made the department head, had planning and zoning, which we got a couple items coming up on the agenda later today. I don't think anybody even testified at the public hearing, so pretty well set up for us for that today. Work session was already mentioned. Mark and I were at MICA. Did you mention MICA? Yeah, MICA. We were up at MICA. And MVAC meeting I attended. We just had our executive meeting. Everything's going really well there. Not a whole lot to add right now for that. The conference call was mentioned. The new employee thing was mentioned. And then the other community events that I made was the breakfast on the farm out at the Gensel farm, which was amazing. We got there at like 7 or 7:30. It was pretty early, and it was already people coming, and it was pretty steady, full of people coming in. And then this is the first time I've made it out to the fly-in breakfast, or that was, I didn't get out there till 10:30.
Meet up here at the Metro.
Yeah, at the
I went
airport.
last year, that was a great time.
We went at 7. We were there a little after
7:30, about
7:30.
Pretty amazing out
And-
there. I mean, especially for the day like we had. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
perfect day.
By the
Cool
time I walked out and looked at the airplane, and then came back, and then the whole line of people was there, and you stopped and visited with all the people. It was a couple,
that's
almost
nice.
3
That's
hours
fun.
out there, but it was nice, and we got to look at one of the hangars that we might be doing some stuff with the Historical Society on. Fred Lute showed us around, and got to check that out. So it was a really nice program.
Nice.
So that brings us up to administrative services.
I was up.
Mr. Chair, the first item on the agenda is the county board minutes for August 2nd.
I'll move the minutes.
Second?
Got a first and a second for the minutes. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Next up would be the bills for the 3 weeks indicated.
I'll move the bills.
Second.
Questions?
I had a few.
Go ahead.
Quick one here, Brennan Construction Company in the first week, $69,000, 733.
That's part of the window replacement project at the government center.
Oh, okay, all right. Another one that I saw was fairly good size was Foth Infrastructure Building Improvement under contracted services also. They had like a $23,000 and then a $37,000 right by each other.
So the 23,000 is part of the Ponderosa building project.
Okay.
And the 37,000 would be part of their operating of the landfill.
Oh, okay, that's their ongoing one.
Right.
Yeah, okay. And then the second week, there was one for Nicollet County Finance for $11,801, and I was just curious what that might relate to.
That was a second quarter payment for the drug task force.
Oh,
They have some administrative responsibility and.
on the
so-
force.
Yeah, we are the fiscal agent for the drug
Yeah.
task force, but
Okay.
paying them.
And then the third week, there was a couple of big ones. Just thought I'd run through them with you. We all should know what they are probably, but Southern Minnesota Construction Public Works, $711,924. Well, it's second week. I'm sorry.
All right.
That must be under the second week, yeah. It's about,
That's part of the County Road 1 reconstruction project.
south of Good Thunder,
Yes.
or not, oh.
Mhm.
Hewlin Brothers was also 802,000.
That's part of our overlay project for this summer.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's all I had. Thank you.
Any other questions on the bills? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 3 in your packet is the Human Resources Department agenda. We do have one action item for today. This is authorization to initiate recruitment for a medium equipment operator. This is a position that was talked about during some of our previous budget meetings as a potential 2017 new position, but because of wanting to get that position started before the snow flies, get them trained in and those sorts of things, we were asking for an earlier authorization to begin recruitment. This position is sort of tied to the turnback of Highway 66 to the county for County Road 1, and so recommending that the county board consider this additional position.
I'll move that position.
You guys take turns, will you?
Got it first?
First and a second.
I'll second it. He
All right,
can
got a first and a second.
Mark's much more important than
Discussion?
It's my backyard.
Questions, comments? We've talked about this
Yeah.
in general, so. Hearing no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Under informational items, we had a staff person invoke a provision of the AFSCME union contract where they're requesting a voluntary demotion. This is a person that received a promotion, and in that contract there is a provision that allows them to return to their previous position within 120 days if it's not a perfect fit. And so Ms. Wojtaski has requested a return to her previous position, and so you'll see the changes there. As a result of that, we need to initiate recruitment for a replacement at that appraiser position, and so we've done that now. We have completed or filled a position in the Public Health Department as a care coordinator. We have had 2 resignations of custody officers in the jail, and so we've initiated recruitment to refill those positions. We also have had a resignation of a part-time library clerk, so we've initiated recruitment to refill that position. And then a resignation of a financial worker, and again we've initiated recruitment for that position. On the second page of the HR agenda, we have increased the hours of a custody officer to full-time from the part-time position, and as a result of that have initiated recruitment to fill the part-time position. And then we have a promotion in the Taxpayer Services Department, Taxpayer Services Specialist 1 to a Specialist 2 position. And then lastly, we have 4 positions that have completed their probationary period and are eligible for a salary adjustment. Be happy to answer any questions if the board has any on the HR agenda.
Any questions? Yeah, a lot of stuff
I
going on.
submitted quite a few questions to Bob already, so.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 4 in your packet is the water plan public hearing. We're asking the board to set a public hearing for September 13th at 9:15 a.m. at that board meeting. This is a water plan, a comprehensive water plan that has gone through considerable work over the last year or so with some public input opportunities and staff input opportunities. And so we want to have a formal public hearing where we can hear additional public comment. So recommending September 13th at 9:15 a.m.
So moved.
Second.
Got a first and a second for the public hearing. Any discussion? Drew?
I'd just like to highlight a couple items. I sent a note to Scott Fickner and Julie, my brain is going. Conrad, sorry. Anyway, so I got a nice summary here. I won't read the whole thing, but it's really good to see this because, you know, we go to these conferences and conventions, and this last time several meetings I was in, they talked about the difference between having a public hearing and trying to solicit public feedback. Public hearings are more like a required thing, and people can give some feedback there, you know, and it's pretty controlled. Whereas if you're trying to solicit some feedback about something going on within the city or the county, you invite stakeholders, you make it more of a meeting, a discussion, and try to highlight and bring up ideas that maybe need to come forward that have been overlooked or not sure how things will impact the community. And so they did over the last couple of years here, or year and a half, have done quite a few events where people, Soil and Water, the SWCD was invited. There was 34 local government units in the county, 11 municipalities, and 23 townships. And people were all invited. Adjacent counties were even invited to hear about the water plan. And And things that were highlighted and brought to the surface were drinking water and
We'll
groundwater.
go over all that at the public hearing, Drew.
Okay.
We're just setting the public
I
hearing
know.
date now.
I just
Okay.
think it's important
It
to
is.
know
It is very
how
important. I
deep-
was
how
part
deep
of a
it
lot.
goes.
I was part of a lot of those
Yeah,
meetings.
it's
So we'll-
interesting to see all of
yeah,
it, so.
Julie will be bringing all that
That's
up at the
good.
meeting, and all that were presented. and
Okay.
There's a lot of
We
stuff
got
going
time.
on there.
Okay.
So, any other questions or comments
you.
about the date? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I got 920.
Let's see.
Award of the County Ditch 28 and County Ditch 78 bond sale. Lisa, George, and
We
Craig.
have some updated information for what was in your pack. The sale was just yesterday.
Okay.
Well, Lisa, is this what you emailed me?
'Cause
Yes.
we got.
I,
we got
I
it.
made copies
We
of
got
it
it.
already.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is it the minutes? Or which one is it?
Thanks a lot.
Oh, that's a different one. Oh, sure.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Oops, there's extra one.
And George, we'll start.
Same as- Okay.
Good
go ahead.
morning, Chairman,
Morning.
members of the board.
Good morning.
George Eilertson from Northland Securities, and just getting around the table here is a handout, bond sale results. And I know there's probably a few extras. But yesterday, we took financing bids on general obligation ditch bonds. This is relating to county ditch numbers 28 and 78. And I know Craig can speak more to the work that will be done out there. So the bond was sized back on June 21st. There was a resolution considered and approved by the county board calling for the sale. And at that time, the bond was sized at $3,230,000. You have a resolution and you have this sale report in front of you for approving or considering the approval of a bond that's been downsized by $115,000 to $3,115,000. I'll get into where did that $115,000 go here in just a minute. But if I could actually direct you to page 3 of this report, this is the tabulation of bids. So we put it out for the open market to bid on, and we received 8 financing bids. 8's a nice number. We've got a pretty competitive bidding environment here, and as you'll note in who are the bidders, it's truly a national audience. The low bid we award based upon the far right-hand column, which is true interest cost. The low bid is 1.63%. And that was a bid provided by Stiefel Nicholas out of Birmingham, Alabama. Now, board, I should back up for a moment and highlight the bond rating. As part of this process, we worked with your county administrator and your county finance director on the assignment of a bond rating. Certainly when we've got a larger bond and a longer bond like this, it benefits you to go out and get a bond rating assigned. It helps to drive that interest rate down. Traditionally, the county has worked with Moody's Investor Service on your bond rating. Prior to this bond, you had a AA bond rating with Moody's Investor Service. Upon review of the market in general, in terms of what other municipalities work with different rating agencies, and looking at criteria that the other firm has, Standard & Poor's, we decided to try Standard & Poor's for this bond issue. We've seen, Lisa and I and Bob certainly have been watching the market, if you will, for the past several years in terms of what other counties have what types of bond ratings and what kind of rating adjustments are being made. So, so again, we worked with Standard & Poor's on this bond issue. And Lisa, would you like to highlight that?
So we were happy that we did get upgraded. We were a AA2 through Moody's, which is an AA. S&P made us an AA+. And the highest is a AAA. So there's 6 counties in the AAA, the 6, larger counties. and we're in a group now of 10 other counties. So what this resulted in, we looked at, we got 6 basis points less on our interest, which is a 0.06%. That results in about, we calculate about a $16,000 savings on this bond because we were upgraded. We just wanted to point out some of the areas that why we were upgraded. They considered a very strong budgetary flexibility, which means we have a high available fund balance, so we have quite a bit in reserves. We have very strong liquidity, which is based on the amount of cash, investments and everything that we have. And then the other thing was a very strong debt profile. This is because our debt is relatively low. So as long as we can maintain some of those areas, our rating should stay the same.
Very nice.
Good job.
Yeah, so kudos to you, board, and your staff worked great. They did a great job preparing for that rating call and providing information in advance of the call, which certainly in part made that a smooth rating call, and it helped with the rating consideration. So as Lisa noted, certainly there's a few benchmarks for us to consider when we consider future projects then, and that's Standard & Poor's was very good having a post-rating call as well, kind of highlighting some of these criteria that went into their assignment to the rating. And for example, that there's a certain debt ratio that you have on existing debt, there's a certain fund balance that you carry, and so these are a couple of things that we'll certainly take into consideration when you have future projects. So that's the highlight. As noted by your finance director, certainly it helped to make the interest rates a little more aggressive on this bond issue. And the rating fee is the same, whether it's Standard & Poor's or Moody's. Relatively speaking, here you benefited by having one notch lower, if you will, or one notch higher on the rating ladder, which allowed you to have a little bit lower interest rates. So. So that was a very good step. As I noted, Stifel Nicholas is the low bidder. I talked earlier about $115,000 that this resolution is now approving a sale of bonds that's that much less. If I could actually have you turn to the very last page of your report, this will explain a little bit of what's called bond premium. You'll see 2 columns right in the middle of the page. One is the coupon. The coupon is what you will be paying interest at on your bonds. The column to the right of that, the yield, is what the true market is for a AA+ general obligation bond. Investors in the current bond market, and actually I think on your last bond sale we had this same scenario, investors like to have premium bonds, meaning that they'll earn at a higher rate of return and they're willing to pay a premium to get that. So the differential between those 2 columns equals approximately $104,000. In addition to the bond premium, the underwriter worked for a little bit less compensation than what we allowed for. So the combination of the premium of $104 and a little bit less compensation for the ultimate purchaser of the bonds is what led to that downsizing from $3,230,000 to $3,115,000. You still net the same amount for project construction. It's just a downsized bond. There's more premium as a source of funds. So Chairman, members of the board, that hits the highlights.
Okay.
Very strong bond rating, very low interest rates as the result. Lisa will get money wired to an account on September 15th if you'll consider the resolution.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept the resolution for the bonds?
Second.
Got a first and a second. Any questions or comments?
Well, thank you for the work that it takes to get the logistics done on this. I mean, I know that it's logistics and there's a big system in place to kind of get it all done. But thank you.
Yep, and thank you for that update on the new bond rating. So,
Good news.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
There you go. All right, we got 9:30, Environmental Services.
Moving right along.
George,
Hey,
Aaron.
George, Aaron.
Hey, George. Hey, Aaron.
Ready to go whenever you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. PC 23-16 is a request from John May for review and approval of a conditional use permit application to operate a dog kennel. The proposed kennel will accommodate up to 10 adult dogs and will on occasion offer litters of puppies for sale. The property is zoned agricultural and is located in part of the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 6, Meadow Township. Mr. Stubbs presented the staff report. The applicant was present and had no additional comment. There was no public comment. There was little discussion by the Planning Commission. Following the discussion, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward to the County Board a recommendation of approval of the request based on the findings presented by staff, and the board action is the resolution.
Thank you, Aaron. At this point, I would like to open up for public comment. Anyone in the audience that would like to comment on PC 23-16, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Anyone wishing to comment on PC 23-16 for John May, please come to the podium. And last call for anyone wishing to comment on PC 23-16. Seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back to the county board.
Move approval.
I got a
Second.
first and a second. Discussion.
Questions?
Questions?
I just wonder, do they switch on what kind of dogs they raise? I was curious if they do.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, they're labs. But
Okay.
they're always labs, only labs.
Okay, that's good. I was just
Gotta
kinda
love it.
curious. Yeah, gotta love labs.
Other
So
questions?
they, and this is the first I've been on the board that we've had someone that I remember,
Mhm.
the dog kennel.
And just for clarification, John May is the owner of the land, right? So it's Dennis Timms that's actually the one that'll be running the kennel,
That's correct, sir.
is that correct? So-
Mhm. But it's John May because he's the property owner. Mr. Timms is renting the property from him. That's why John May had to be included.
Right. So he's not part of the business?
He's not part of the operation at all, but it is on his property, and so he had to sign the application and
Okay.
be a part of it. But he is not involved with the business.
Okay, thanks.
And he's had several state contacts with other rules and regulations, so
Yeah.
this isn't the only set of eyes looking at this.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
PC 24-16 is a request from Blue Earth County for intention to enact amendments to the Blue Earth County zoning ordinance, also known as Chapter 24. The proposed amendments will include information related to Section 24-44, violations, penalties, and enforcement provisions. The amendments also contain information related to Section 24-48, Board of Adjustment. Mr. Stubbs presented the staff report. There was no public comment. The Planning Commission commented on the thoroughness of the work conducted by staff and expressed their appreciation of the process leading up to the amendment and that they looked forward to continuing training opportunities. Following the discussion, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward to the County Board a recommendation of approval of the amendments, and the board action is the ordinance.
Okay, anyone here in the audience that would like to comment on PC 24-16 for Blue Earth County, please come to the podium, state your name and address. Anyone wishing to comment on PC 24-16? And last time for anyone wishing to comment on PC 24-16. See no public comment, I'll bring it back to the county board for action.
Move to approve.
I got a first.
Second.
Second. Discussion, questions? This is a meeting that we spent several hours in. All of us were invited. Several of us made it to several of them. I think I made it to all of them. County attorney was there. Most of the planning and zoning did a lot of work on this. So I think these are just some good adjustments and amendments we'll be making to the plan. Drew?
Just curious, so when it becomes a chargeable issue, but usually, from after reviewing all this, the county works with people so that usually doesn't happen.
Correct.
Right, I mean, this is just, if somebody's really bucking the system, basically, I'm just trying to paint it all black and white. Somebody's just bucking it completely, doesn't want to comply with anything, and finally, they can receive charges then for not complying with the planning and zoning ordinance that's in place.
That's correct, Commissioner. Yes, you know, our policy is to work with the property owner.
I've noticed
and bring it
that
into
too.
compliance. I mean, the county attorney and his staff are extremely busy, and you know, if we can get compliance through just a letter or working with them, and meeting out on site, you know, that's the easiest, quickest, and most economical way to do it. But this is the last resort, and it just gives us another tool to bring compliance as a last resort.
Okay, so that if it doesn't work there, then the language that's in there is so that it'll end up right in Pat's lap, basically.
And just so you're aware, Commissioner Campbell, we've worked closely with environmental services on many of these issues and continue to work and push forward on these. Ultimately, we don't care about how we get there. We simply want compliance.
Yeah.
And you know, we've got the policy in place that typically at least a minimum of 3 contacts, 3 letters, 3 contacts explaining to people what they need to do, why they need to do it, and to follow through with it. Otherwise, here's the potential ramifications. Worst comes to worst, if we have to, then we'll bring them into court. Obviously, that is time consuming, and we try to avoid that and work with people, because ultimately that's all we care about is simply compliance.
It helps clarify it. Just.
No, and I appreciate the question.
Any other questions or comments? Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, we do have 2 more items for the board today. Items number 9 and 10 in your packets are revised bylaws for the Planning Commission as well as the Board of Adjustment. Attached to each of the revised bylaws are resolutions. We are recommending approval of the resolution as 2 separate motions.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the bylaws? For the first one is for planning and zoning.
I move.
Second.
Got a first and a second. Again, this is kind of in conjunction with the same item we just discussed. A lot of discussion and effort put into this by county staff, Aaron especially, and some outside attorneys and Pat's input also. So, questions or comments on the planning and zoning bylaws? I got a first and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Board of Adjustments bylaws. Kind of same thing. Aaron, you have anything else to add?
No, sir, I do
Okay.
not.
Do I have a motion to accept the bylaws for the
So
Board of
moved.
Adjustments? Got a
Second.
first and a second. Discussion? See no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
We got a couple minutes. We can go up to administrative services and finish those couple items, I would imagine.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 5 in your packet is the second quarter donation. So this will be April through June of this year. The first page are cash or monetary donations. Most of those donations have gone to the library. The largest ones being Friends of the Deep Valley Library that have provided $5,000 in the second quarter for operations of our local libraries. The second page are in-kind donations. Again, these are in-kind donations for the library, and you'll see that we've had a number of donations over those 3 months listed. And the third page then are volunteer hours given to the library. So this is a page that is relatively new in our tracking, but we have received excuse me, a number of hours of support from people in the community down at the library. So we appreciate the help that those folks are providing.
Well, it's nice to acknowledge those people that do that volunteer work. So, you have a motion to accept the
So moved.
donations?
Second.
Got a first and a second. Any discussion? Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, item number 6 in your packet then is the financial status report for July 31st of this year. Slightly over halfway through our fiscal year. You'll see that our total revenues are at 46.3% of our target or our budget at this point, where our expenses are at 46.9% of our budget at this point in the year. So both are running a little bit behind our anticipated budget figures. In terms of areas where our performance is either above or below our target, the contracts and fees somewhat stands out in comparison to the prior year, even though compared to the annual budget, we're still behind our target, but with our construction season running a little earlier this year, and also some projects that continued through the winter months, compared to last year, our contract and fees line is higher. Our fees for service on the revenue side has been strong. We're at 63% of our budget, so those dollars are coming in well at this point. State and federal dollars are lagging a little bit behind again at this point. We should see some of those state and federal dollars come in August and hopefully catch us up there. Overall, we're about $600,000 in a deficit position. Not really that surprising at this point, especially given we plan to use a couple $1 million in reserves as part of our 2016 budget. Going down a little further to the enterprise fund, there we are again in about a $300,000 deficit position. A lot of that is related to the construction of the recycling and drop-off building, so a lot of those costs are funneling through this particular budget. The second page then deals with our cash and investment balances. Our total county funds sit at almost $102 million, down from a prior year. So you'll see we have utilized some of that fund balance as planned with our budgets. But overall, when you look at our total available funds compared to what our 6-month operating needs are, we're a little bit below that target. But again, when you look at our overall cash position, it's very strong and stable. Be happy to answer any questions that the board members have.
Questions, comments? Okay. We'll move on to 940 MS4 authorization resolution. Scott and Ryan. Morning.
Morning. Morning, gentlemen.
Today we have before you a resolution authorizing the county engineer and the Environmental Services Director to enter into a municipally separate storm sewer system program agreement with the City of Mankato. This is follow-up to our discussion at the August 9th Board of County Commissioners work session meeting where we had provided the program agreement along with the bylaws of the association for consideration and discussion and following your direction. We're presenting the resolution today authorizing us to enter into the agreement. It also authorizes the County Environmental Services Director and County Engineer to act as agents on behalf of Blue Earth County for enactment, implementation, and execution of any and all aspects of the county's MS4 program in accordance with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency State of Minnesota requirements. We have attached a copy of the agreement for your information. It has just been slightly modified to change the names to the correct representatives for the county from the previous iteration that you had seen.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution?
Motion to accept.
Got a first and a second, and we had this discussion item at one of the work sessions. We spent several minutes talking about it and fielding questions from the board, and I think we're ready to go unless someone's got some other questions at this point.
Just have
Drew?
one small little thing. So do we pay half then of that $11,000? The $11,000 is shown on the last page of the agreement is an itemized representation of each duty, and all of those duties are broken down by the requirements that are laid out in the permit requirements. So minimum control measures number 1 through 6. The activities that go along with it, they're separated into annual lump sum cost items and per event cost items. So depending on whether it's a regulatory or an annual informational website hosting type of activity, but they are 100% county costs.
They are 100%.
There's the charge that we will pay to the City of Mankato to render those services on behalf of the county.
So they get $11,000 from the county, not from a township or anybody else?
That's for the county's agreement with the City of Mankato to perform those services.
If I remember correctly, the townships have to pay something too then?
They will develop their own
using the same structure, the same agreement they'll develop, and they'll enter into agreement with the city of Mankato on their own.
Okay.
So the county's acting as its own MS4 permitting agency, which is the requirement. The townships have to do so as well. So in order for each of us to enact our own MS4 program, we're entering into a separate agreement with the city of Mankato, but we're creating a greater alliance or association that will act as a governing body.
Okay.
There, on that $11,000, there are some upfront costs that will not be considered annually because we have to do the second part of the permit the first time through, so that I think was $2,400.
I see that, yeah.
And that's a one-time situation, or at
Okay.
least the permit is, I think, 5 years, so that would last that long.
And there are also quite a few per event cost items. At this point in time, we're uncertain how many per event cost items we're going to encounter annually.
Okay.
Given it's a new program, so it could be less, it could be slightly more.
Okay.
We effectively, for the cost estimation, assumed one per year of each potential item.
Well, the reason I asked too is that when I look at the annual lump sum cost items, they add up to $5,500, and I just thought that was half of the 11,000. So I
Oh,
didn't know.
no, that's just the column of annual lump sum, the subtotal of the annual lump sum column.
Yeah.
And then if you move over to the one to the right, the per event cost items, we factored in a cost for those items as well.
So that's like a one. You think those things might only occur one time?
We're
at this
approximating,
point, at this
you know,
point?
we
So
may
it could
have,
change.
may have an item that occurs 3 times and another
Yeah.
couple of items that never occur.
Oh,
So
I
it's
see. So
dependent
it's
on
kind of an
development and
estimate?
permitting, correct. Yep, and
So do we pay that then, the 11,000, and if they don't actuate these over here, do we get a credit back from the city?
we don't pay until they've been incurred.
Till they've been
So
incurred.
and it's all detailed in the agreement as far as how frequently they will invoice us and for what cost. But, yeah, on the per event, we only pay as it's performed.
So technically, it'd be the 5,500 that's a
Minimum,
a rock solid fee that the county will pay.
that's correct, plus.
Okay. And I have one more quick question that
Yep.
kind of sticks in me a little bit. I noticed that in the agreement, there's a cost of living adjustment, or, you know, some sort of an adjustment for the amounts. And I'm just thinking, why is that necessary? Why is that built in there? Was there some discussion that came up that had to be, that we have to increase it every year, you know, up 1%,
I think
2%? I mean,
and I've discussed it in review with Scott and
Yeah.
Bob as well, and I think the consensus is that it's just a cost escalation and keeping their costs relevant to the current pricing and including future escalation for their people, their labor, their overhead.
yeah.
So they're just including that if their people get a
Do we
raise
do
of a
that
certain
typically with our
percentage, it rolls
contracts
into
and
their
all our
contract.
contracts? But it just doesn't sound like that we normally do that.
We don't do it with a lot of our contracts, but with the contracts with the city of Mankato, that has been much more common over the last few years, where they have requested that because they have labor costs that continue to go up based on labor agreements, and that they wanted those cost of living adjustments to be included in any agreement.
Okay. The reason I'm speaking out on it is because, you know, as an elected official, you know, government just tends to seem to want to keep building things like that in, and I think to me, it's a warning sign when that kind of happens, unless there's a justification for it.
Mhm. Well, it's certainly a legitimate question, and we flagged that item and discussed it as well while we're
Really?
reviewing this document, and
Okay.
we do feel it's fair because they do have escalating costs in their staff as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering.
All right, any other questions? Got a motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. All right, wonderful. Thank you. As this
Thanks,
process
Scott.
moves forward, we will be back to discuss
Well, yeah, one of the main parts of this issue is going to be the ordinances that come with it. The city of Mankato has got a set of ordinances that we will be using for consistency within this organization, this group. But we will have to bring them, they will be Blue Earth County ordinances. We'll be working with the county attorney's office and so on to make sure they fit with ours as far as how the definitions apply and so on. So we'll be bringing those back to the board as they become established.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for your
Thank you.
time.
Thanks.
Scott's excused, Ryan, you have to stay.
You gotta stay
after school.
Yeah, you have to stay. I always gotta stay.
You've been a bad boy.
All right, we got some bids to go over. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The first action item is consideration of County Project 791, bids for the Rapidan Dam Stabilization Project. The engineer's estimated amount for the project was $2.2 million. As you recall, we have a DNR dam safety grant for $2.4 million to cover not only the construction costs, but some of the engineering costs that go into the project. With this type of work, it is highly variable depending on the weather, the season, on many other factors, and the bidder's workload. So we worked with our consultant Kleinschmidt Engineers and developed an approximate cost estimate of that $2.2 million. I do have a detailed copy of the bid abstract if you'd like to review it. We were very fortunate to have qualified bidders submit bids with Kramer North America and J.F. Brennan. Kramer came in at $1.18 million and Brennan came in at $1.46. We had very favorable bids, which is outstanding. Gives us a comfort level moving forward. Kramer, as you may recall, is a contractor that recently completed the County Road 147 bridge rehabilitation project. I was very impressed working with their staff and look forward to working with them on this project. So, I would recommend approval of the bids for the Rapid End Dam.
I'll make a motion
stabilization.
for approval.
Second?
And a first and a second. Any other discussion or questions? Drew?
It's an amazing low bid.
It
for
is astounding, but I think
does that set off any red flags that when you have a bid that's almost half of what the engineer's estimate was?
given that Brennan came in, you know, $300,000 higher, Kramer actually took the time to come and visit the dam and walk through the structure itself and walk through the project with our staff. So they had familiarized themselves with the conditions of the site a little bit better, I think, than Brennan had, which I think gave them a little bit higher level of comfort. Also, having recently worked with our staff, I think there's perhaps some comfort level there, as well as being a little bit more local company. I think in the engineer's estimated amounts, just being a highly specialized level of project, there's a fair amount of risk that was built into the engineer's estimate by our consultant engineer. So I think you're seeing some of that. They're very cautious with their estimates. So I think a lot of that is reflected.
That's.
I have a quick question. What do we do with the money then that's left over?
Yeah. Well, we'll request as much as we can through our engineering, and if I'll check the grant agreement and make sure that we can request perhaps our own staff time that goes into the project as well to be reimbursed. So as much of that as we can get back.
Okay.
But as you recall previous discussions, all of the repairs that were provided for in the plan set had to be approved through the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee and the DNR through the Dam Safety Program.
The Dam Safety Program.
I'm not sure that we'd be able to add in anything like windows or anything like
Okay, do you think that's
I'd love, believe me, I'd love to do so, but I don't think it's viable.
This is the original estimate. So
Yeah,
that's why
I
I'm
know,
just
I know it
asking if they would be willing to let us put.
I think it also gives us, you know, on a project like this where you're fighting Mother Nature, you've got some unpredictability, so that if we do have contract overruns or extra items that come up as we get into it and begin the work, it gives us a significant factor of safety.
Yeah, because
And
you're
that if we have
bound
an
to have
overrun,
some-
it'll cover it, so.
I know. Yeah, but if there's anything restorative that they're willing to do.
I'll check into that and get
you'd
in
be
touch
willing
with
to
you.
just to keep
Yeah.
it in mind, because that was part of the intent was also to restore the dam.
I understand.
The safety is always primary.
Correct.
We know that.
Yep.
But it was actually a risk to restore the dam was kind of the effort, so.
And, yeah, as I understand the administration of use of the dam safety funds, they're strictly obligated for that scope of work.
And they were granted through the legislative action, so I didn't know if there was some way they could.
I can make
get
an
some
inquiry.
funds to us.
It does not hurt to ask by
Okay.
any means, and I'll do so.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. All right, I got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. All right, thank you. Next order of business is consideration of bituminous pavement bids. We put out a second round of solicitations for pavement. This is, we tied our County Road 146 overlay. We had a little bit of excess road and bridge money that we had saved from having tremendously low bids in the earlier spring. So we put out a second contract to pave County Road 186 in the southwest corner of the county. And we had also included the work with Luray Township that, as you may recall, is a cooperative project with the township and State Park Road accounts, paying for all of the work on that project. Now that paves from our County Road 48 to the west to the DNR boat landing on Madison Lake, and then goes into Lakeview Road and covers some of the work that the township had wanted included.
Bids came in very well on that project as well. Well, very reasonably well. We did only receive one bidder, Southern Minnesota Construction. 1.11 million. Our engineer's estimate was 1.051 million. They're 5.7% over the engineer's estimated amount. Our segment of County Road 146, we actually came in on a $450,000 engineer's estimate. We came in $4,000 under our estimate, so we hit it right on the head with the county's portion. So we were very happy with that. The township's portion had a little bit more variability with some minor pipe replacement work, and it's just a narrow area with difficult access to get in and out. We have met with the township, reviewed the bid results, and they're comfortable proceeding forward. They may wish to ask the contractor to reduce some of the quantities. I did also inquire with the State Park Road Account Administrator and MnDOT State Aid. And for the eligible State Park Road Account items, we're going to get another $18,000 to help them cover, help the township cover that gap. So it's 100% of the State Park Road Account items are going to be funded based on the
Very good.
low bid.
All right, a motion to accept the bid.
So moved.
Got the first, second. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
Thank you, Ryan.
Tremendous. Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks, Ryan.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much, yeah.
Yep.
All right, we'll move on to Mr. Michael McLaughlin.
I've heard that name somewhere.
Morning, Michael.
Good morning, Michael, and welcome aboard. Congratulations.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Yeah, glad you guys let me go after him. So.
And right before the break, so
Yep.
if you go a little long,
So,
we'll be
yep,
okay.
I'll try not to hold up lunch then. So what you should have before you, should have got a revised copy of the resolution between Blue Earth County and the State Department of Veteran Affairs for the County Veteran Service Officers Operational Enhancement Grant. And pretty much defines itself right in the resolution. The grant must be used to provide outreach to the county's veterans to assist reintegration of combat veterans into society, to collaborate with other social service agencies, educational institutions, and other community organizations for the purposes of enhancing services offered to veterans, to reduce homelessness among veterans, and to enhance the operations of the County Veteran Service Office. So it's a pretty standard resolution. The State Department of Veteran Affairs pretty much cookie cutters it out across all the counties. All the other surrounding counties have entered in the same agreement. It was actually due the 1st of July, but I'm working with the grant specialists, and the state's very accommodating and working with the individual counties. So attached to in your board packet was the grant agreement itself. That gets in a little bit more of the specifics. The amount we're getting is $12,500. That's legislatively appropriated every year. They do their math up in the state legislature and equates down to how many veterans you have in your county. So, and then I put some of the attachments in the back there that just as examples, but attachment A in that grant agreement shows some of the things we can use that grant for. My particular interest is getting the office to increase its capacity, engagement with the veterans in the county. So I'm going to pursue laptops and mobile printers so we can do home visits with some of the housebound and elderly veterans in the community too, and then also pursue some outreach events at MSU, where we have 600 veterans in the county that are attending that institution too. So
very nice.
And with that too, we can use it for training and education of the service officer staff, including national accreditation, continuing education credits, and I believe I'm still checking on it for the secretary or the assistant. They actually have training too for her at the state association level too. So we can use some of those funds to increase operations and capacity, and then education of the department. There is a small percentage we can use, 15% of the grant for advertising. They kind of refined that now. I know you guys are probably familiar with the billboard that was out on 14, and LeSueur County has one too as well. It's 15% of $12,500, so I think that was just under $2,000 is what we could have with that.
Nice.
Perfect.
So,
motion for approval.
Second.
There we go. We got a first and a second. Any other discussion?
Just one question.
Yep.
I noticed it uses the word combat veterans.
Yep.
And I wasn't sure, I don't work with it as much at all. You know, people ask me questions about it once in a while in the county, but does the Veterans Administration make a differentiation between people who, let's say, work as a clerk here in an office in the United States as a veteran and their benefits versus somebody who's been in the field fighting and been seeing combat?
There's different categories of care with VA healthcare enrollment, and you're entitled to some different benefit levels clarified as a combat veteran. There's two distinctions. Usually it's congressional service periods where the feds take care of that and release. World War II was from December 7, 41 to May of 46 is where it was, and so anybody in that timeline is a World War II veteran. Then there is actual award designators that say, yep, this individual was in combat, and opens them up for some additional services.
It does.
This specific grant isn't going to limit to combat veterans
Oh, it isn't?
only.
Okay.
They put them in there along with homeless veterans too in reintegration because they're one of the higher risk populations of the veteran services. So they usually make a point to point those three categories out. So.
Okay. Good.
Good.
Does this grant, is it bigger or smaller compared to concerning the amount of veterans in the county?
Yeah, well, I believe Faribault County, since they have a lower population, I think they're getting about 10,000 or 9,000 in there. So they have, I forget the actual per veteran number, but they do their math on what the county has for population. Compared to the other counties, it must be tiered because Blue Earth County is about 4 times as many vets as Faribault County. They have 1,600 veterans, and we have about 4,600 in the county. So, and then LeSueur County has like 1,800, and they get just about $2,000 less than us too. So, I'm assuming it's some sort of cap like 5,000 and below, and 10 to 5 is where they have their ranges. So, but they, like I said, they pretty much hand it as a cookie cutter and say, this is what you're getting. Do you want to apply for it? Yes or no? And my answer is yes.
Good answer.
Very good. Yeah,
I
good
really
answer.
appreciate you doing this because it's one thing I brought up to Bob in the past, and even though it's only $12,500, it's for our veterans. We need that, and to make sure that they get the services they deserve. So thank you very much.
Yep, and it hopefully with the laptops and the mobile printers will help increase our ability to take the fight to the home front. So.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I got a first and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. And then we had one other item, Bob, or is it all?
I think we're
That was
to a
it.
break
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very much.
Michael, and again,
Thanks,
welcome
Mike.
aboard and congratulations.
Buckets, we're
Say,
right
Mike, I
on
wanted
time.
to tell you that I've already, even though you're a very short period of time that you've been on, I'm already hearing comments on how awesome of a job. I talked to Kevin Metler and the work with Veterans Court and stuff, and how you're sitting there and just jumping right in and taking, helping our veterans that are in some of the worst times of their life. So I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
10:10, we have another person on the agenda, so we will be starting at 10:10. All right,
All right.
we'll get our meeting called back to order here. At this time, we got Wildlife Management Area Restoration with Mr. John Schneider. Ducks Unlimited, welcome.
Good
morning.
Stand here?
No, you're going to join us
Come on
right
up
up
here.
here.
Come on up.
Yeah.
We're friendly.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to pass around some handouts. It's my copy, and I'll give you these. And then one of those for each of the commissioners. I had some questions during the break about things DU's doing, both this project and our conservation work in general. So there's two handouts there coming around. Good morning. I'm John Schneider from Alexandria, Minnesota. I am the Conservation Program Manager for Ducks Unlimited. I'm a wildlife biologist by training. Happen to live in Alexandria, but I cover the whole state. I manage our program primarily from a fiscal standpoint with grants and that sort of thing, but also direct traffic at the field level. I'm here today simply as an informational purpose to share some good news about our exciting restoration project in Blue Earth County, just to clear the air and provide some advance notice on our plans before they happen, and certainly before you hear about them. This project is taking place down in Danville Township, near Minnesota Lake, on land adjacent to the state's existing Stokeman Wildlife Management Area. And it involves about 59 acres of land that we were approached by the landowner and other parties involved. About a year ago, the DNR indicated they thought it made a good addition to the state's wildlife management area if it were acquired and restored. It's marginal farmland, relatively wet. The owner wanted to sell it, and at the time a group called the Conservation Fund stepped in on behalf of the DNR and worked with the landowners and the bankers involved to come to a very agreeable resolution for the disposal of the property without going into other avenues. Ducks Unlimited is proposing to buy this land now. We're planning to this September, and then we would move quickly once crop harvest is off to restore the land, beginning with wetland restoration. And in the handout I passed around, there's a couple different error images. One is an early map that shows our early estimation of the wet areas we could restore. Then there's a engineer's plan that is literally hot off the press. Saturday morning, our engineer refined this and sent it to me to pass to you. It's a preliminary engineering plan. We've conducted a topographical survey, and those are his estimations of where wetlands could be restored. And the last page on the back there is just to give you a sense of how this parcel fits into the existing state Stokeman Wildlife Management Area. And what I'd like to point out is you can see the boundary of the purple, the state area. The state basically owns up to the high water mark around that wetland on the west side of the property, and all the ag land there that we're buying drains down into those wetlands. And those wetlands are basically in terrible shape. They're really turbid, green, don't really support much aquatic life, certainly not providing quality wildlife habitat and waterfowl habitat. Waterfowl need clean water, clear water to grow aquatic plants and aquatic invertebrates. That's what they eat. Yeah, they feed in cornfields, but they need, most importantly, aquatic invertebrates and plant seeds and vegetation to make it through, especially as ducklings and that sort of thing. So the ecological purpose of this project is to buffer the existing state water bodies and provide some prairie upland habitat and small wetlands around them. This is a strategic project. We're not out willy-nilly just doing whatever comes along. This one made sense because the state's already got an investment in that Stokeman area, and we're trying to simply buffer it. So there is a Canada goose depredation concern there too now that this project will resolve. Let's see, what else can I tell you real quick? The taxes always come up on projects like this, and I'm pleased to tell you that the 2016 taxes were about $746. I think that's because it was homesteaded. I didn't check with your staff, but suffice it to say, Ducks Unlimited will pay our taxes in full during our temporary ownership while we're restoring the site. That's our policy. We always pay taxes in full. And then once we transfer it to the DNR, probably next year, maybe 2018, the Minnesota DNR will make a payment in lieu of taxes, and that amount is estimated at over $3,000. So
wow.
There'll be, no loss in tax.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do this the right way by communicating with you in advance before we start our work, and we're trying to make sure it makes sense from lots of different perspectives. And I guess the final thing I'd say is this is funded by public funds, our tax dollars, through the Outdoor Heritage Fund that was approved in 2008 by the voters that passed the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment, and it'll be open to public hunting and recreation. So it's really an asset for the citizens of Blue Earth County. With that, I'd take any questions.
All right. Questions or comments for John?
Well, it sounds like a good project. I mean, we just spoke briefly during the break, but it sounds like a really good project, and it sounds like it makes sense. And the county, as far as our revenue, it's a win-win for us, and it sounds like for the property owners and everybody, it's a win-win over there too. So it's really good. So
super. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent
What
project.
was the difference between what the taxes will be paid that are being paid now compared to what they're gonna be paid under, you know, in the future?
I'm not, Commissioner, I'm not really sure, you know, as a wildlife biologist, I didn't have time to call the county tax assessor and visit about that. My understanding, my sense is they're probably relatively, they were low in 2016 because we assumed the site was part of the homestead, so they were relatively low. I'm sure they will be higher for us in 2017, and that's fine. I don't know what they'll be, and then the DNR's PILT payment is a formula based on the sale price, the value of the land that we paid, and so that's $3,000. So all I can tell you definitively is that the estimated PILT payment is about 4 times the amount that was paid in 2016, with the caveat that there must have been some sort of homestead discount.
Okay. Thank you.
Not fair bet. Thank you much.
Any other questions? Nice project. Good
Thank
job.
you. You've got my contact information.
Thank you very much for
so
coming down and
call
giving us a
any
presentation.
questions come up.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so much. All right, I guess we can move right into human services. Bill. Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Phil.
Morning, Phil.
I have a couple of things I need to distribute here real quick.
Oh.
Oh, that's.
He ain't coming around.
He's
We got a
coming
lot
this
of
way.
stuff.
He's coming this way.
We got a lot of stuff today.
I'm sure you read digested all I was.
You know, you always amaze me.
I wish you would do all this stuff.
Well, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, thank you for seeing and hearing me today. We have some action items to start. Mr. Chair, the first section is supportive housing. And the first 2 contracts I'll take together because they're exactly the same, 2 different providers. One is for Partners for Affordable Housing, and the other is Skyline Inc. These contracts help us provide group residential housing, long-term homelessness funding and services through the Department of Human Services. We offer a maximum of 10 slots. This is an issue that we've talked about at some work sessions, just about a new funding source for vendors to provide case management and long-term, that's associated with long-term homelessness. These are both new agreements, but no county funds are involved in either of the contracts since it is a state-funded program that's administered by the counties. The term for both contracts, September 1st of 16 through August 31st of 17. So then skipping down to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, we have a legal agreement between Blue Earth County and HUD in order to finalize our grant funding used for rental assistance for chronic long-term homeless participants. There's a 2.7% increase, and you'll see a small little chart below of how that money has increased in small increments over the last 3 years. The term of this agreement is May 1st of 16 through April 30th of 2017.
Let's get a question.
Yeah.
On those first 2, you know, the housing, the Partners for Affordable Housing, Skyline Incorporated, and it's kind of like pass-through dollars. Is that kind of what it is, or?
Well, it really is that we administer the dollars. It is state appropriated dollars, so
Right.
the state sets the rates, and then they apply. And this is what we talked about in the work session, where there's an application process. They talk and show us what they have as far as their services, and then we approve that up to 10 beds to try to control that, because we don't know exactly what volume we need in our community yet, and we don't want to overbuild or authorize the services. On the same time, we don't want to preclude anybody from doing this work if there's need. And so that's kind of the decision that we've made, is to incrementally increase this funding source in this program according to those state funds through the vendors as they apply to us to be a vendor.
that with the Partners for Affordable Housing, it's 10 additional slots than what they've had then in the past.
Right. This would be new
So
slots.
you're adding 10
Yes.
more beds.
Right. It's 10 slots for services, so that's the interesting. So the GRH is a funding source that, excuse me, I'm sorry, is a funding source that supports the, sorry about that. GRH is a funding source that supports the rental assistance bed. So actually this next contract where we have a HUD relationship, where we have some state relationships, where we provide housing stock, this is really a funding source that supports the supportive services in that housing stock. So it's a new funding source altogether.
So there are additional beds to our community then?
No, so
They're
the
not.
beds exist.
Oh, they
and what it
exist.
does is that a provider says that somehow they will support, it's the supportive housing function underneath the bed. So in other words, people could rent, right,
Yeah.
without services. This is saying that they'll also receive case management services. Does that make sense?
So the case management services then are through Partners for Affordable Housing.
These two vendors, right?
So because I was going to ask, how can it be no cost to the county?
Right.
If we're providing some services, you know what I mean? I didn't know what that meant.
Right, and
So
I probably should be careful with the wording, because I would say there's costs, but they're not,
Yeah.
they're not financial outlay, there's no levy dollars.
It takes some staff time to
Right,
make sure
you
these
got it.
contracts are in place.
Exactly.
And then the state takes over, and then they get the funds directly through the state.
So the state actually uses us as the administrator, so we're the administrator of the contract and control that front end, but
Oh.
it is a state pass-through, I mean, they do provide the funding through the state.
Oh, okay. Two Partners for Affordable Housing.
Right.
But this is not additional beds.
No, and so.
Because all I've heard, and Mark would know, that they have such a high demand on them that so this is no more of an inch towards the goal of having more beds, because they need more beds.
Right. So in our work session, we talked about this, is that there's, low-income housing that people can get. What
Yeah.
we're also wanting to do is wraparound services, right, in addition to just the
Yeah.
bed. What we're hoping for, though, and this is why I'm giving you a complex answer, is that as there's a funding source to support the services that go with those folks, those slots, that we hope that we can do more and more. So we're hoping that vendors will come in and say, we actually are going to maybe build a low-income housing unit that has 10 new beds, and this funding helps us support that mission.
So
right before this, we have had no support for the
I see.
dollars at all.
Okay.
This is brand new.
Okay, I got you. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the services are new.
The services are new, Commissioner, absolutely.
Okay, that helps me, thank you. I was confused, I really was.
Well, it is.
Thanks for those questions.
Yeah, I have to say, it is confusing.
I didn't know if it was
Right.
additional beds or if it was.
It is confusing, and the truth is, like I say, we really do need the beds. I agree with you, Commissioner, that we definitely.
Well, they turn
need-
away like
Right.
30,
Mhm.
30,
Not
40
close.
people or something a month. I mean,
Can't keep up at all.
Yeah.
Exactly. The next section I have is on public health, and there's just one item under that: Minnesota Department of Health eliminating health disparities. MDH contracts with Blue Earth County in two areas: refugee health and latent or active tuberculosis. I have shared with the board that our tuberculosis incidents have been up dramatically, so we almost always have cases where we're investigating exposures and activity around if it's latent or active tuberculosis. So this has seen huge increases. And then the bad news is our amount is $1,570 that we get for this work. So, and that is a 75.5% decrease. The reason for the decrease is that they did, I believe this is where they reallocated money for the Zika virus, so that they took money out and
sure.
put it towards that immediate need throughout
and
the nation.
this goes to community health, doesn't it then?
Right, you got it. And so the term of that one, July 1st of 16 through June 30th of 17. And then the last section is Blue Earth County Mental Health Center. Two items. The first of those is one of our prescribers, Deb Sowers. She has her doctorate in nursing. She provides psychiatric medication, urgent care, and diagnostic assessments for both Blue Earth County and for our regional initiative. The rate we pay her on a contract is $102 per hour. The term is September 1st of 16 through December 31st of 17. And then finally, our Alliance Healthcare contract. This is our employer of record to allow us to do these contracted employment relationships with providers who aren't, the traditional Blue Earth County employee. This employer of record service is for specified employees. Right now we use it for 2 advanced practice nurses, 2 registered nurses that came out of the state hospital, and 1 part-time financial assistance worker. And the rates for the contract are unchanged. They do a flat fee structure of 20% to cover payroll taxes, workers' comp, unemployment, administrative costs. And that's all bundled together in the 20%. The term is from May 1st of 16 through December 31st of 2017. And those are my action items, Mr. Chair.
I'll move the action.
Second.
Got a first and a second. Any questions or comments? Discussion?
One quick one. Phil, on the, like, when you get these advanced type practitioner type people, Deb Soares, let's say she's a doctor of nursing and mental health, and now if that was a psychiatrist, because she must be working under the authority of a psychiatrist.
So that's an interesting question. That has changed in the last couple of years, yes.
Okay.
And so these folks actually, they do have, and often in a lot of the advanced practices, a period of time where you have to be under supervision just to get your license. Once you have your license,
then you don't have to.
They can practice independently, and that's brand new, Commissioner, in the last couple of years.
I was going to say, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so APRNs, you know, we've always talked about Dr. Farnsworth, that we need him to supervise our APRNs. That's changing, and we really could run the clinic just with APRNs now.
Wow.
And that's just in the last couple of years that that's changed.
And if that was because of the demand and everything, they
well,
made
right.
realistic
I think, and
changes.
rural access.
Yeah,
You
rural
got it.
access.
Absolutely.
So if she was a psychiatrist, would that rate per hour be higher?
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. So Dr. Farnsworth, I can't even tell you off the top of my head, Commissioner, but it's higher than that.
It's probably closer.
Significantly.
So, okay. And you see the treatment being pretty well done though.
Absolutely. These are, well, and you know, we tend to find the folks that have passion for the work we do, so we all know that we're serving some folks that have multiple needs.
Yeah.
They usually have a passion around that, so Deb Soares, I can speak to her practice, that she just does top-notch care, and like Melinda Henderson,
yeah, I remember Melinda
Margot Breezy. I mean, these folks have just a ton of passion, and they are, you know, really those people that are willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So the urgent care part is, they're often like saying, you know, if somebody's waiting in the lobby and doesn't have meds, they'll fit them in, and they're just those kinds of practitioners. So it's really heartwarming to see how hard they're willing to work for this mission. Definitely.
Okay, and I kind of wish I would have been, I wasn't really maybe that available yesterday, but the work that's being done with, you know, looking at issues regarding the jail,
absolutely,
mental health, diversion,
right,
you know, all that kind of stuff. Will there be more of a report on that? Is there going to be more of a to the board
we
itself?
provided Will an update more specific to his role in helping us with the detox mission.
Okay.
But we do have a steering committee that we're going to put together at kind of that quarterly basis, where we'll keep folks informed, and we'd like, you know, maybe Administrator Meyer and maybe one of the commissioners, board chair, or some designee to be part of that, so there's an ongoing update, because we know that's really important. We met with Pat recently again, so there's some primary partners that quarterly meetings isn't going to be enough as we get rolling.
Yeah.
But we do want to make sure that we give ongoing updates on that. And this advanced practice nursing will be a huge part of it, as well as trying to just add some RN time, just to make sure that people are stable when they come in, and they might, you know, have some chemicals on board, or their mental health might be in the point where we just need to know, are they medically stable enough to incarcerate or move on to some other place.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
All right, I got a motion and a second on the table for action. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I know we have our friends from MICA here too, so I will be brief. The discussion item today is just to give you a picture of where we're at with child protection. Just a couple slides to give you a sense of that. I apologize, it is the extra piece of paper that I passed around. Bob did notice that our graph did not accommodate the numbers that we have, which I suppose says something, but it was an error on my part, so I apologize for the way that graph looked that was in your packet. The one that I handed around shows the increase, and you know, really makes a bold statement about a sharp increase really over the last 3 years that has been taking place. But even in this last 12-month period of time, I think we all know that there's been great attention and scrutiny to our practices around child protection. I think the net effect of that, you know, there has been some very good things that have happened where we have additional staff, and as you all know, you supported the collaboration with the Sheriff's Department, have Tim Wendler as part of our child protection team from the Sheriff's Office. So there's been some huge bridges and improvements. I do get concerned, to be very candid, that our workers, you know, feel like the risks that you might take alongside of a family, they're not taking them as much anymore. So our out-of-home placements are really high. We talked about that as a work session. And then you see it in the numbers here of our caseload counts are also, you know, at a record high level. I do hope that we can have some dust settle back into our practices, that we can make sure that the safety of children is paramount, but then from there that we also are able to work alongside of families and try to, you know, our mission is both keeping families together as well as assuring safety. Those don't always align well, and we do them both at the same time and in concert with Pat and other folks. And so that combination is a tough one, as you are all fully aware of. The breakout of what those cases look like is on the pie chart on the next slide. And this is also fairly straightforward, but just to emphasize, the neglect is always represented in more than half of our pie, and that's held true for many years. You'll see followed by physical abuse at 32% of our cases, and then the mental injury and abuse, very small little piece up at the top of the chart at 2%. And finally, our sexual abuse represented 12% of our pie. So those usually don't move around drastically based on our volume in our community. You can imagine in a smaller community how there might be a lot more volatility because they have a lot less cases, and so sometimes those move around pretty drastically. I think things are going well. Staff are working extremely hard. I do think, like I say, it's a mixed bag between some very good things coming out of some of the additional attentions that have come to child protection, but there's also a caseload and a certain tension or pressure that I think staff have felt for the last couple of years that I think, you know, also is a factor to be managed.
You're polite about and all that with the legislative changes, and you've been around enough to know, yeah, it's a pendulum.
Yeah.
They keep.
Right. It is a pendulum thing, I think.
Keep going back.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're looking for that balance, and I think that's a respectful statement, because the advocates have, you know, long, you know, stated that they want to make sure that we assure safety. Well, we all know a lot happens behind closed doors in a family, and we are a reactive resource that comes once we get a report. When we do get a report, we have to be top-notch about our qualities. That's true. But I do think that there's this art of practice that comes in, and how do we work alongside of families and try to keep some families together.
I was going to ask you, because what concerns me sometimes is that maybe we might become so busy with the family assessment, family investigation, and then, you know, what's going on if there's out a home. Are there your program that you have over there that you implement?
Right.
Is there a real ability to reach out to those families and offer them maybe what services they might need, whether it's in the community or you know, referring them? Because I think about the things that occur in these families, and we don't talk about them here very much.
Right.
So you find out that one of them just lost a job, maybe.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that might trigger somebody to be abusive or neglectful, maybe.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's hard to say. All these little things that happen, their family, the relationship and their marriage might be on the rocks. There might be some drinking that's occurring more than it used to.
Right.
Trying to drown some issues that are going on within their own being.
Right.
So then how are we able to, is there outreach to them to say, you know, this is what we see, here are some services that are available. Is that happening, Phil?
It really is happening, Commissioner. I mean, I'm very proud of the work we do, and I've been long an advocate of that I think we should be careful about how we look at our whole continuum of care, because when we drop the ball, we drop the ball. There's really no excuse for that. And people do make mistakes at times, there's no doubt. But the vast majority of the time it goes without comment because it's very high quality work, and our working together with the Sheriff's Department is an example of that. We're not mandated to do that, it's just the right thing to do to bring in expertise. I will describe that as a very known commodity, Commissioner, and you're absolutely right. It's about mental health stability and, you know, untreated mental illness at times. it's about chemical use, and it's about poverty. There's no doubt that that captures over 90% of what we face every day. And they're chronic. So what you're saying is, but how do we reach out and change that pattern? And sometimes the poverty isn't the student at MSU that doesn't have enough money and meets below the standard of poverty. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about multi-generational poverty where there's really not enough money to put food on the table. Is that a stressor? Yes. Is that a stressor where people start to behave very poorly? Yes. I think it is absolutely at that root that you're talking about. I think our bell-shaped curve is that there's a bunch of folks that really, with just some attention, it's probably in any those of you on the board that have a law enforcement background, you pull someone over, sometimes the pulling them over is very therapeutic. And us being involved is very therapeutic and is enough to get them back on track. There's, on the other far end of the continuum, is egregious, ritualized, evil abuse that happens to children sometimes. Those are very obviously meant to go to Pat and his team and making sure that we really look at those as criminal issues on the other extreme. Then there's all the folks in the middle, which is the bubble of the bell-shaped curve, the most of the folks we serve with. And that's when you have to really come alongside a family and say, what is your issue? What is your culture? What do you value? How do we take a step in the right direction? We don't have a magic wand, you guys all know that.
Yeah.
But we do know how to make it one step better. And I think that's the mission that we have, is to keep in there for the long haul. Not that we can swoop in and fix things. They're long-term issues. And in all of our families, there's no such thing as a perfect family. But some of these families have multiple problems. So we just say, can we get stable housing? Can we get you some money so you have enough money or food support that you can put food on the table? Those things help. They really do. So, yeah, I'm very proud of the work we do, definitely.
Okay. Sometimes I think that it might be putting so many Band-Aids on there. There's not enough of a program that says, well, I'm free to go out there and kind of meet with them and see what, these are the things that have been identified, and I can spend some time with the family and see what we can do. We're so overburdened with all the other things,
Well, I've talked to Kathy Sharon about this very directly in her great passion for this work as our senator too, and how much she's put into this. But there's no doubt that it's about money too, as our caseload sizes are high. And if you reduce those caseload sizes, which some counties have been able to do with a healthier tax base, to be honest, like the Olmsteds, they have very low caseload sizes. Your quality will go up. There's no doubt about that. It's an obvious thing, is if we cut our caseloads in half, our quality will go up. So even though I'm very proud of our work, we do the best with what we have. And more resource helps quality, and there's less mistakes or there's less cracks for people to follow. It's a very, very straightforward dynamic, but I think you guys have really treated us extremely well. Bob, when we had, I think, an allocation of 2.7 FTEs, and we got, 3 bodies, because it's not easy to hire 0.7 of a person. So you guys have always erred on the side of trying to support our mission, and I think in that way we're doing all that we can, and it feels like we're getting it right. I think staff are feeling a little crispy right now. They are, but it's because of that pressure and that feeling like we just have to get this right. Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Phil? Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Good to see you.
All right, we got our MICA presentation at this point. We'll need one more chair.
Is there another chair?
I gotta step out for a second.
Okay.
Take mine.
Okay. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. I was gonna say something, but that'll be good.
We got a big crowd here.
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
How we doing?
Morning.
Always nice to see our friends come stop by here.
It's nice to be here again. We had a pleasant drive down and appreciate the good weather and accommodating our schedule so we can get a few of our southern swing in here today.
Good.
We're partially responsible, for the good weather.
Now the important part, are you coming to lunch with us, or?
Yeah, we are.
All right.
Yeah, we appreciate that
All
too.
Let's get the important stuff out of the way right away.
Yeah.
So. Well, welcome, Keith, and
Well,
your
thank
staff.
you very much, Mr. Chairman, members. Keith Carlson with me today, are Nancy Selesky on my right, and then Steve Novak and Ryan Erdman on my left, and they'll follow me. I'm going to start off with sort of a big picture overview, and I'm not going to really belabor things. First slide in the document that you have of my presentation talks about what happened at this end of the session. As you know, they had 4 major issues before them. and only one of those got completed. That's the supplemental budget bill, a bonding bill, one-time transportation funding proposal stalled out, and a tax bill got vetoed for reasons, again, that I'm not going to go into detail. Ever since then, until the end of last week, there have been on and off negotiations about whether or not there was going to be a special session to come back and complete some of this work. And Governor Dayton apparently concluded that at the end of last week by saying he would not call a special session. So we're left with the fact that for 2 years in a row there's been no tax bill enacted with any tax relief or increases in state aids, and no bonding bill, no transportation funding proposal. That's to some extent maybe good news, because the state's coming to the conclusion of what I'd say is a 4-year period of relatively good times financially. When they started this session, they were looking at a 4-year surplus of $2 billion. And the reality is that they're probably going to need it after you take into account inflation. If the tax bill that was ultimately vetoed had not been vetoed, additional money would have been coming Blue Earth County's way. About another $131,000 of county program aid instead of the $215,000 increase you'll be receiving next year. There would have been a new riparian aid if you elected to accept jurisdiction for administering last year's buffer law. You would have gotten an additional, my estimate, of $123,000. Some minor good news is there was a one-time funding increase for SCORE, which will bring some new dollars. Another thing of county concern is funding for broadband. Funding of $35 million for that was included in the supplemental budget bill. So that's on the positive side. The grant application cycle is just opened earlier this month and will close by October 1st. The bad news, though, is that there's a new, what I would call an incumbent provider veto that says if the incumbent in the area that a grantee wishes to extend service to says that he or she is going to provide similar service that meets the state standards within an 18-month period, then the grant is tossed out. So that is leading to some frustrations with at least some localities. At this point, I'm going to stop and turn things over to Nancy to talk about Health and Human Services, unless there are any questions here.
Any at this point? No. Thank you, Keith. Nancy?
Hi. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Nancy Selesky, and I do Health and Human Services at the Legislature, and it's a pleasure to be in Blue Earth County this morning. In terms of Health and Human Services, I would say it was kind of a mixed bag in terms of results. Keith mentioned that the supplemental budget bill was the one bill that the Legislature was able to pass. That was done on the Saturday before the Sunday mandatory adjournment date, so it was a lot of activity in that last weekend. Going into conference, the spending targets were set. The Senate wanted to spend $43 million, whereas the House came in at 0. So that's kind of where we were going into conference. In the end, they did spend some money. However, no general fund dollars were used. Almost everything came from the Healthcare Access Fund. And I want to point out the importance of that. The Healthcare Access Fund is a result from the 2% provider tax that funds Minnesota Care. That tax is scheduled to sunset in 2019. So that fund has limited use at this point. If the legislature doesn't do something about that, that fund goes away. So I just want to point out the importance of that. So this year they spent about $77 million, again, almost exclusively healthcare access funds, and then about double that in the biennium, about $154 million. They also captured some one-time surplus money out of the CD treatment fund of $2 million. So that's where the funding came from. The majority of the spending, I would say, was on mental health. They did put some money into the operating budgets at St. Peter, the Security Hospital at St. Peter, as well as the state sex offender programs. In terms of positives, I want to point out that counties will enjoy a temporary reduction in our percentage relative to the chemical dependency cost share. It went from almost 23% down to about 20%. It's one time only, 2017. It will save counties about $2 million on a statewide basis. The other thing that we were pleased about is going into conference, both the governor and Senate had counties contributing to the cost share relative to folks that are being provisionally discharged from the Minnesota Sex Offender Program. We pay a percentage for them while they're in the facility. They had a proposal that would have also had us paying for those that were discharged. In the end, that did not make it into the conference committee report, so we were happy about that. Other things the legislature spent their money on in terms of HHS, they put together a 15% increase, 15% increase to foster care rates. There was some pretty compelling testimony from people that are in that business, in that industry, indicating that the rates are just so low. So that was increased at 15% starting in the next biennium. They also expanded the safe harbor law by raising the age for victims of sexual trafficking from age 21 to age 24. And finally, they partially fund one of the governor's priorities, which was preschool funding. They put $25 million into preschool programs that will target about 3,700 more kids that are living in somewhat impoverished areas. So that's where that was. Unfortunately, as has been the case, we picked up a couple of cost shares. We'll now be paying 100% for community behavioral health hospitals for those folks that are no longer meet medical criteria for being in that facility. That's a cost shift to us. And also we'll be paying a share for a new program. It's called the Competency Restoration Program. This is a program that will be operated by state-operated forensic services, and it's intended to add additional psychiatric beds to both Anoka and St. Peter. I just want to mention a few things that did not pass. The legislature is still wrestling with MNsure. That's been, our exchange has been a problem, as we all know, since its inception, and there were proposals, everything from getting rid of it altogether to changing to a private vendor for technology. There was language that would have reduced their operating budget by half, and there was also language at one time that we liked that would have required the state auditor to look at the costs that are incurred by counties relative to our doing the eligibility determinations and related enrollment activities. None of that happened, but there was a lot of discussion about it, and that discussion will continue. They also debated a few things on Minnesota Care. The governor had convened a healthcare financing task force that met last summer, and a couple of the recommendations that came out of that group were discussed, did not happen. One of them would have extended the 2% provider tax that I just mentioned, goes away in 2019. That did not happen. And there was also a proposal that would have increased the eligibility for folks accessing Minnesota Care from 200% to 275%. That also did not happen. One thing that I worked hard on with a number of other folks for Blue Earth County and counties at large was using ITV technology for certain case management services. That was launched, as you know, Phil and Angie have been working with the department on this issue for a long time. Wasn't getting anywhere, so we went to the legislature. Senator Rosen was our champion in the Senate, and Representative Nick Zerwas from Sherburne County was our champion in the House. We made good progress. It was actually in on both sides at one time of the supplemental spending bill or budget bill, but in the end it did not make it. We kind of were having discussions with the department all along and exchanging language with them in terms of what it was that they could live with, couldn't live with, and we were disappointed that it did not make it in the final bill. So that is something that we will go back to the 2017 legislature with. I know that Angie's had some sort of informal discussions with Senator Rosen, and so we will follow up with her. She's she was the author of the telemedicine bill, and she's really a technology person and really believes that this is a no-brainer. We have to find a way to make it work. So we will go back on that issue next year. Finally, I just want to mention a couple of things relative to public health that were included in the budget bill. They put money toward the Good Food Access Program, which will make available affordable, nutritious food for folks that are living in underserved communities. They also put money into racial and economic equity, $35 million this year with $17.5 million ongoing. And that's to put together programs to address racial disparities, including education, job training, career development, etc. The Department of Health is required to undertake state planning relative to the Zika virus. And then they did add a couple of conditions relative to who can access medical cannabis. They've added a couple of qualifying conditions for those that are using medical cannabis. Couple public health things that did not happen that will be back next year related to increasing the MA reimbursement rate for family home visiting and also an enhanced benefit for asthma care. And with that, that's what came out of the 2016 session. It was, as you know, a very short one, 11 weeks. We laugh saying some people think that's too long, some people think that's too short.
It's a session that wasn't.
Yeah. Again, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Nancy?
I just have one comment. It's about I've got some concerns myself. I'll just say them out loud here about the competency restoration program. I just think that Minnesota should be more progressive, and I think we are. And I think that whole program is kind of anti-mental health. I mean, in a sense, it might seem like it's mental health related because it's trying to restore a person's mental health so that they can face charges in court, basically. And it just seems counterproductive or counter-philosophically beneficial. Does that make sense? And I worked at Security Hospital for 28 years, and this program now is developing to try to get people so they can face their charges in court. Well, they were mentally ill. You know what I mean? They didn't know maybe exactly the ramifications of their actions at the time. Now they're stabilized on medication. They can look and they can say, yeah, oh yeah, I see what I did. Oh yeah, I guess. But should they be held to the same standard as somebody that knows exactly what they're doing? So I mean, there's some real conflicts there that I have, and legally, I wish Pat was here almost. Oh, there he is. I mean, he could make some comments, I'm sure, about this whole issue, because we're working towards trying to help people that have mental health issues and trying to get them stabilized, and yet we want to get them stabilized so they can now be charged with face their charges, and I just think it's counterproductive. It really is, putting people possibly then back into jail when they were mentally ill and didn't realize, oh yeah, I took off my clothes and walked outside, now I'm being charged with indecent exposure. Oh yeah, now I got to go face my charges, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time. That kind of thing. So it's anyway, I'm sorry, I just have a comment about it.
Yeah, no, Mr. Chairman, we appreciate your concern. As you know, there's multiple dimensions of this particular issue. Yeah. It's also a matter of who's paying during that period. As you know, when we put people on civil commitment holds, we're paying the tab.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this, in part, is an effort to shift more of the tab to us. And it also has the dimensions that you mentioned. So both Nancy and I are spending a lot of time with it, as we are with our county colleagues.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Any other questions for Nancy at this point? Okay. Thank you, Nancy, for that report.
Well, I'm going to go next. Mr. Chair, board members, Ryan Erdman. I wear a lot of hats. I don't know if there's a board in the state where there's 5 faces as familiar as the 5 of you.
Kind of scary for you?
There's usually at least one that I kind of don't know, but I don't feel like that's true around this table. So
we're sorry about that. Did you tell us?
Well, I don't
Was
know.
it because you're somehow? Didn't you work for AMC?
I still do.
Oh, you're Commissioner Campbell.
I do me.
Yes, I still wear my AMC hat and my MACAC hat, and today I'm wearing my MICA hat. So I've got a lot of hats. I still wear them all on varying days. So good to be here. Everybody wants to get to Steve's presentation on transportation, so I'll be brief. Five quick things I'll refer to. One of our priorities as counties this session was a proposal that Commissioner Purvis was instrumental in helping promote for a courthouse security grant program created by a task force convened by the Chief Justice
Commissioner Purvis was among our county appointees to that task force. I think your public defender from down here was on that task force as well, if I remember correctly. So you had a couple local representatives. We proposed a $20 million grant program. We succeeded in getting a $1 million grant program. It seems like a relatively low success rate, though I think I'll talk a little more detail about the overall public safety budget in a moment, but the total public safety budget at the end of the day was an increase of about $29 million. So knowing that was the cap for everything, a $20 million grant program for one little deal was obviously a non-starter. I think I always say that there is a silver lining here, and one of the things that we experienced, and Commissioner Purvis could speak to this too, is in those meetings with me, we never could really very well quantify the need statewide in dollars. We could go to every county and identify their need for a courthouse security, whether it's training or equipment or infrastructure, whatever. We could always identify that need, but we couldn't quantify the dollars. My hope is the fact that a grant program is established, the fact that we'll be taking applications, that we'll get a nice big stack, and frankly, with only $1 million, we're not going to award most of them, but then we'll have a dollar amount that we can go back to the legislature for future advocacy and say, here are the kinds of applications we got. Here's kind of the scope of the need. So I hope there's a bright side there. Commissioner Purvis will also be on the committee that's setting criteria and reviewing applications. They'll be meeting here in just about another week or two for the first time. And we have other county representatives there as well. So we'll have a voice in setting what exactly are the criteria, and then reviewing those grants. It does require 50% local match in terms of local dollars for that program. Dovetailing then into the budget overall, there was that $1 million, the other $28 million, a lot of it was salaries for negotiated contracts at the DOC. They didn't fund a lot. There's a lot of things. There was a task force on prison population. Mr. Milo served on that task force on behalf of MACAC. They talked about a lot of things. They didn't fund a whole lot. They did fund one grant for halfway house and reentry services. It's about $300,000. Those criteria have not been established by the DOC. It will also require a 50% county match. So there's a few small things in that budget, but they did not fund any prison expansion, either in the bonding or in the operating budget. There's a lot of debate about the Appleton facility, but then also smaller bonding proposals for the DOC, and they didn't do any expansion to accommodate that prison growth. They did fund some additional forensic scientists at DPS, significant increases in juror per diem and mileage, which is long overdue. So they spread that $29 million around a little bit. And got some good stuff, making some progress there. Tying back to the prison issue, there was a proposal from the Sentencing Guidelines Commission, as you all know, to drastically reduce drug sentences for a lot of offenses. I know the county attorneys, law enforcement, and many others were not enthusiastic at all. That's probably an understatement to say they were not enthusiastic about those proposed changes to the sentencing guidelines. The county attorneys as an association, public defenders, and private defense bar came together and started working on a compromise. A little later in the process, they did also bring in law enforcement and put together a package that was ultimately successful of drug sentencing changes. It does adopt some of what was in the guidelines proposals in terms of some reduced sentences for some crimes, change the threshold weights to get the first degree, second degree, etc. Does actually enhance some penalties for the so-called kingpins, those with large quantities of drugs, some of the marijuana grow stuff. Actually has some enhanced penalties. The net is a significant savings in beds to the DOC. Anytime you say significant savings to beds in DOC, there's a concern at the county level that means they're going to be in our jails or on our probation caseloads. For the most part, it would appear that that is not going to be the case. Primarily, most of that savings is due to shorter sentences, but people still going to prison. So that not too much of that should fall back to counties. There was a category of folks that were a 5th degree felony and will now be a gross misdemeanor. It's a relatively small slice. It's just the trace cases, only first timers. Very few of those people ever went to prison in the first place. I mean, a tiny fraction of those people ever went. They were all on probation anyway. So in terms of any additional local jail time, in a county the size of Blue Earth, I would expect a handful at most. In terms of your jail, maybe 1 or 2, a handful on Josh's caseload that maybe would have been otherwise in prison. But for the most part, it should be manageable from the county perspective. So that's good news, and and it will at least hopefully slow the growth in the DOC facilities, but they are already over capacity, so only slowing the growth is going to be a continued conversation in terms of what they do about that. So those are really the big picture things. Two other things I'll touch on very quickly. One, Real ID. They did pass a bill that allows them to plan for Real ID, and they had a proposal that would allow them, that went to look at implementation of Real ID, that bogged down on 3 points, only one of which they were able to settle. One was the two-tier system, letting citizens opt out of a Real ID compliant driver's license and not having their information shared with the feds. They finally agreed that that would be the way they would move forward. The House bill did not have that option originally. And then implementation date, as well as some language related to driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, were two issues they were just simply unable to resolve. And as Keith noted, apparently special session is now off the table. Even if it had been on the table or comes back on the table, I don't think they're going to resolve Real ID. They'll just put that off into a future session. The aircraft boarding regulations happen about 2018, so we've got a little time to do that. The last thing I'll mention is police body cameras. They did put some structure around how you treat the data for police body cameras. Most of the data is presumptively private except for a few instances, discharge of the officer's firearm, use of force resulting in great bodily harm, or if the subject of the data requests that it be public. Mostly private, puts in parameters on data storage and that kind of thing. But the one thing I want you to note as a board as a key thing is the county, if you are going to implement police body cameras, have to adopt a policy related to that. Statute lays out a dozen or so things that have to be addressed by that policy that you have to consider in addressing your policy. And you as the county board have the responsibility and a requirement to take public comment and have at least one public meeting prior to adoption of that. So, working with your sheriff wants to implement that, obviously you'll have to have a budget discussion about buying the equipment and the data storage and all of that other things, but you will have to have at least one public hearing as a board on the adoption of that policy going forward. A question I've heard from others is if cities in Blue Earth County were to do it, would you have a responsibility? And the answer is no. The city council has a similar responsibility, so there is public hearing and adoption of policy requirements on cities, but it is a burden then on the city council, not on you. So just keep that in mind if you're moving ahead and having that financial conversation with your sheriff about implementing the technology that you have. There is that one other component that's required of you. So those are really the highlights. I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, Steve can tell you his tale of woe on transportation.
Any questions or comments for Ryan at this point?
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Always good to be in Blue Earth County. Nice to see you folks. Steve Novak, Transportation for Micah. The long and the short of it is I think everybody knows when everything's settled, there was no increase in general fund or bonding for transportation after a 2-year effort where it seemed like something had to happen. A quick summary of how we got to that conclusion. Looking at the 2-year biennium going back to the beginning of 2015, we got off to a great start. Both the Republican House and the DFL Senate publicly acknowledged the size and scope of the problem, and they agreed on it. $6 billion over 10 years. Then they proceeded to have their normal hearing processes in 2015, and remarkably, they both passed a bill in the House and the Senate that, in their minds anyway, would have responded completely to the solution of the $6 billion over 10 years. Then the problem started, and of course, the reason for the problem is they probably could not have taken more opposite philosophical routes to the solution. And basically the way that broke down is the DFL Senate addressed the problem from a historical standpoint by utilizing historical existing funding sources, permanent over a long term, that have always been there. They proposed increasing the gas tax, registration fees, and a variety of other things like that. The House took a very different approach to it. They suggested that there was more than enough money already being produced through various general fund mechanisms and so forth, and what we really needed to do was to reorder the priorities of the general fund towards transportation. And the centerpiece of their proposal was to shift the money from the sales tax proceeds on auto parts, which is a multi-$100 million per year item. So they both passed their bills in their respective houses. Unfortunately, those bills passed almost exclusively on partisan votes. And so they went into conference committee in the spring of 2015 with that situation. Because a transportation solution was part of sort of the master plan at the top by the leaders, they were hamstrung sort of from the beginning in terms of an aggressive committee schedule to really go to work on this, but they did meet. Very little got resolved in 2015 and even less in 2016. So when you clear the smoke away and actually look at what it sort of comes down to and where the differences are, just from the perspective of getting some understanding of why there's this stalemate, there's a lot of issues, but I say it comes down to three. One is Southwest Rail, the completion and extension of the rail system, supported by the DFL Senate, adamantly opposed by the Republican House. The second one is to have a traditional increase in the gas tax be part of the overall solution. Again, that was supported and passed in the Senate. That was opposed and not dealt with in the House. And then the third item would be the use of general fund appropriations in a significant way for transportation, significantly supported by the House, significantly opposed by the Senate. The inability of the House and the Senate to come to grips, I think, with those three issues, or find a way to compromise with those three, probably as much as anything explains the deadlock that exists at this moment in time. They had four swings at it. As Keith had mentioned, there were four major bills in 2016. The bonding bill, which would have had a major one-time transportation component in it that just missed at the end, so that resulted in nothing. The Transportation Conference Committee itself, which of course had the multi-billion-dollar solution in the House and the Senate bills, but taking completely different approaches, they never got agreement on their conference committee, so there was never a vote on it. The supplemental appropriation bill, which did ultimately pass, had modest amounts of money on the Senate side, about $40 million, zero on the House side, and the House position prevailed. So although that bill passed, there was no transportation money there. And then there was always speculation that there could be major transportation funding inside the tax bill because of things like the gas tax and registration fees. But in the end, although that bill passed, it had no transportation provisions in it, and then the governor vetoed it for a completely different reason, having to do with impacts that could happen to the Viking Stadium under kind of what seemed to be a minor provision that turned out to be a significant issue that to this moment in time still has not been resolved. So that, I think, summarizes the frustration that lots of people have. I think it outlines in detail the size and scope of the problem, and that's the only ray of light here, is that these two diverse political bodies agree on the problem and they agree on the size and the scope, but they cannot get resolved how to solve it. So that's where we sit. There were some minor transportation policy bills that passed. If anybody has any questions about those, I'd be happy to answer them. I don't think they have any major comprehensive impact. I do want to make note that we really enjoyed working with Al all those years, your county engineer, and hope he's enjoying his retirement. And now we're looking forward to working with Ryan, and we really appreciate the impact that Blue Earth County's had on our committee structure, particularly in transportation. It's been significant over the years, and expect that will continue, so appreciate it. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Steve? Drew? No, nothing?
Well,
questions.
I appreciate all that you've done, Steve, and all that we work on. I mean, obviously, we'll be working close together again in transportation this year, along with me being on the board with Transportation Alliance and 169 Corridor, and me and Drew being on the Highway 14 partnership. And I mean, it's transportation affects every single one of us here in the state of Minnesota, and hopefully we can get rid of some of our partisanship and we can work some situations out. But see what happens.
Yeah, I think we can only hope that in the 3 months that remains or less of the campaign, that these issues get discussed and played out at the local legislative level, and maybe the public will help sort things out for us. But right now, the way that way the hands are being played, it's
Doesn't look good.
hard to find a winner. Yeah, it's amazing how stiff their positions are, and clearly the state is not coming first in terms of the priority of
Sure.
legislating at the moment, so, on either side.
If there are no other questions for Steve, I'll just close things off up here with just kind of a discussion of what you should be looking forward to in 2017. I've already mentioned one, and that's that there's no special session, which means that there's going to be a significant carryover of this biennium's agenda into next biennium. And whether they can really deal with that, can they do 2 bienniums worth of bonding proposals in one biennium? Will they be able to pass a tax bill not once, but 3 times in terms of the relief that is usually handed out annually, or deal with any shortfalls in the state? The 2 other factors are, one, that we're having an election now where every seat in the legislature is up for election, and it's definitely going to change the composition. The composition of that legislature is going to have major bearing on, one, transportation, but it's also going to have bearing on future funding for county program aid, whether or not there's a possibility of levy limits being reinstated, whether or not there's a metro sales tax that plays into this mix of what's necessary to come to a compromise in transportation funding, the assessment and taxation of electric utilities, and as Nancy has mentioned, the status of MinCare and Minsurance funding. The other thing that is going to have extraordinary bearing, and I mentioned it at the beginning of my comments, and that's the status of the state's financial picture. As I mentioned, I think we're coming to the conclusion of a relatively good financial position for the state for the past 4 years. That's frankly coming to an end based on current projections. As I mentioned earlier, when the legislature went into this session, they had $2 billion above and beyond current law obligations without taking into account inflation for essentially the remainder of this biennium that concludes next June 30th, and the next biennium that will conclude on June 30th of 2019. They spent some of that obviously on the supplemental budget bill, but a lot of it was left unspent, and it looks pretty good from that point of view. But once you take into account inflation, which I'll take pains and say what many legislators say, they don't have to fund it, but the reality is, in many instances they do, whether it's for early education through 12, funding for the school districts, state government, or the higher ed system, they usually receive an increase almost every biennium. So the reality is at least a significant portion of that will usually be spent. And by the time they look at that, what they're looking at in reality, based on the Department of Finance projections, and taking into account the fact that they had $230 million more of revenue than they anticipated for the fiscal year that just ended last June 30th, they have about a $264 million surplus. That's really small relative to what they're... So again, you shouldn't anticipate significant increases in health and human services funding. Whether or not a general fund could be used for transportation, I think in practical terms, that's probably off the table. Aid increases like we were hoping to get from this past session is also under question. So with that, I'll conclude, be happy to hear any final questions or comments.
Any other questions or comments?
We left on a happy note, so no.
I got one.
Go ahead, Drew.
Well, I'm just curious, I know another issue that comes up, every couple of years for many years, and that is our legislators getting a raise, up there. They seem to be deathly afraid of working it out themselves. And so I think, have they hired some outside sources to try to figure out if they should have a raise or not?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Campbell, yeah, they hired the voters to take care of it.
So it's gonna be,
It's on the ballot that, the wording of it is, should the legislature be removed from setting its own salary? In very rough terms.
really?
Yes. So if that measure were to pass, a commission would be created to set legislative salaries, and potentially we would finally get past what many view as a logjam in giving increases in
Yeah.
legislative salaries. So it depends completely on the outcome in this November on that constitutional amendment.
It's a big debate item, I know. And I've heard people say that they appreciate whenever a county commissioner can run for state, senate, or house. Because it seems like they've had some experiences with local government and can understand what happens with the dollars up there. And there's been a trend for some of them that were legislators to become county commissioners, maybe because of some of the frustrations of dealing with state law. But so, you know, it's just too bad because there is a big debatable thing, you know, where's that sweet spot, you know, where you attract people to be able to even serve, you know, to serve in that capacity. And yet it's been many years, hasn't it, since they've had an increase, I think.
It dates back, I'd say, at least 25 years.
Yeah, it's,
since there's been
I mean, it's a shame.
And what's really interesting with that is, by the way it's written, you think, yeah, we're not gonna let them give their own pay raise, thinking they're gonna give more of a pay raise, but in retrospect, it's just the opposite.
They haven't, yeah.
Because there's so many that don't want it because it's politically bad for them. I mean, I see other states, Colorado and other states that do the type of thing where they have the commissions and the legislators and stuff are paid much higher because you know, because of that, they're not voting on their own pay raise.
Yeah, interesting. I just want to bring it up.
I think the other point on that issue, having gone through it with Mark, and back in the days when we used to actually vote for pay raises.
Yeah, we had.
The really sad thing that's happened over 30 years, I think, is that there's been no public discussion about what the role of the legislator and the legislator's job really ought to be. And so the way it's drifted, we've ended up with the worst of all worlds. We've got them down there running around, pretty much working full time, because the schedules aren't regulated in such a way to provide the time that's necessary for a person to serve and work full time in another job like we used to do. And so we've drifted into this situation where they make enough money they can't publicly complain about it, but not enough money to live on, and the job itself is becoming all-consuming in terms of time. Especially in the second year of the session, it was never intended to be the way it's run today. I mean, it was supposed to be a review and check on the budget process, and you'd be back home doing your regular job. And now they keep introducing bills and having those hearings on public policy. So, you know, the real solution is to have a public discussion about what do we want from a legislator, and what should we have a right to expect, and once we establish that, what should they be paid? And nobody's going down that route, which means that and you know, once they turn themselves into a political football, which is what they did 30 years ago by making it a political issue, you're never going to win that battle, you know.
No, you're right.
No.
Well,
Yeah, we
as-
usually tied it with whatever, we usually got something, but it was tied with something else, like, I mean, you worked it out, whereas.
Well, for about 10 years, they used to give pay increases to state employees, and so they
Yeah,
tied
we
the
were tied to
legislative
that, yeah.
increase at 1% below what they paid the state employees, and Luther did that, and for about a decade, it incrementally went up, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 a year. But then somebody decided to play politics with that and knock that one out of the park, and then, you know, for a cheap, short-term sell, you destroy an institution over 30 years, which is, you got a
Were you
mess.
there then? I wasn't there yet, I was going.
Well, I'm a lot older than you.
Amazing, it's amazing.
I don't remember.
Will, do you have a comment?
I just had a question for Keith. You talked about the 2017 riparian aid that wasn't provided when the tax bill was vetoed. Does that mean there's no compensation for the counties to take responsibility for enforcing the buffer law?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Purvis, that's correct. There's no explicit compensation for your accepting jurisdiction to administer the new buffer law, absent the tax bill and its repairing aid.
Great, thank you.
Wow.
Guess that's an issue.
I just wanted
Any
to
other
make sure.
Any other comments at this point? Well, on behalf of the county board and as the board chair, I just want to thank you guys for coming down. Keith, you and your staff do a great job. Mark and I sure enjoyed coming up, very informative. But it's also nice to come up to the MICA meeting and hear all of our department heads, Josh, Angie, Phil, Bob, being mentioned, Ryan coming up to the ranks, and Al in that arena. So as a commissioner, it's pretty exciting to hear that. So, but you guys do a great job with the meeting. We always get some good informative stuff out of there, and thanks for all your hard work, and thanks for the trip down here.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you for mentioning that. I do want to recognize both you and Commissioner Piepho for representing the county on the board, and also recognize Bob and your extraordinary staff. They play significant roles in assisting us in putting together and advocating our legislative agenda, and basically sharing information with other counties on initiatives down here, and getting the same from their counterparts. You have some extraordinary people down here.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll look for a motion to recess to Papa
moved.
George's for lunch.
Second.
Got a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.